Hey guys, today I'm going to make this modern plywood dining table. The table has a simple design with only a slight chamfer on the sides. The base is really easy, only using a couple of angled cuts. Enough of me talking, let's get into it. At first I wasn't sure how to cut out a perfect circle into plywood. I originally was going to make a giant compass, mark out a circle and jigsaw it, but I'm pretty useless at cutting on the line. I found out the best way is to screw a router with a straight bit into a scrap bit of ply, and then add a screw in the middle of the dining table, making sure it's from the underside and not the show face. Also, you probably realised that I'm using a palm router, not a proper router, and you'd be correct. I recently dropped my router and it's broken, so this will have to do. If you're going to make something similar, I really would recommend using a proper router, as it would be easier to use a router with a bit more torque. After I was all set up, I started making very light passes, making sure not to stay in the same spot for too long, as this burns the ply. But if it does, it's not a big deal, you can always sand most of it off. Every rotation I lowered the bit a little deeper. Once I got all the way through, I left little tabs on the inside, 4 in total, so that when I finished routing, the circle didn't drop through and potentially pinch. So as after I did all my routing, I got my Japanese pull saw out and I just cut those by hand, making sure not to cut inwards towards the circle that I just cut. So I was left with a perfect circle with a little bit of extra wood where I sawed it off. I flushed that up with a flush trim router bit to give it a nice smooth edge. I wanted a slight angle inwards underneath just for more comfort, so I used a chamfer router bit to make a nice bevel underneath. Keep in mind that I'm doing everything upside down at the moment, so don't get alarmed. I'm putting that bevel underneath, so eventually when I finish all this, I will flip it over and that will be my top. Now for the legs, I chose to do everything at 10 degrees, as I didn't want the angles to be too aggressive. Also, if I did a bigger angle, it would make the base even bigger. As you can see, I have one long piece and 2 shorter pieces that make a plus sign in the middle. All the outer angles are 10 degrees facing outwards. I pre-drilled and screwed these pieces down to the underside of my tabletop, making sure they were nice and tight. I had to make sure when I cut the legs I took into the account of the 10-degree angle. These cuts have an angle cut facing opposite ways on each side. You can see this in the next few clips as I screw them in. I used the same joining method for all the legs, which consisted of pre-drill, glue and screw. When I pre-drilled, I found out that I had to pre-drill on a slight angle so that the screws would go into the center of the piece behind. Once I had all the legs on, I had to finish the base. I used the same method for the top of the frame. One long piece followed by 2 smaller ones. I waited to cut this until I had all the legs to make sure everything was nice and tight. I moved everything to the ground and measured up my last little pieces. To join the smaller pieces, I used pocket hole screws, making sure to make the holes from the underside of the base so you can't see them. If anyone is getting into basic furniture making, I really recommend to get a pocket hole jig. I have a Craig K3, but any brand will do the same job. The only reason why I went Craig is because they have pocket screws that are easy for me to buy locally. After I finished screwing everything together, I wiped up all the excess glue with a damp rag. I filled all the screw holes with wood filler. The next day I sanded everything with 220 grit as the pine and the ply was already smooth. I didn't want to risk sanding through the thin birch veneer. I made sure to clean off all the dust and I applied a coat of Bondel clear wood varnish in a satin finish. For my friends in the US, I recommend using a product called Polycrylic by Minwax. I used a foam brush, making sure to do nice even strokes, and at the end I went around the edge to get any drips. In between coats I did a light sand of 240 grit. I did 3 coats in total, but in hindsight I think I would do 4 coats, but 3 coats is plenty. If you're still watching, why not subscribe? Either click on the red logo in the bottom right hand corner or hit that big red subscribe button. I painted the base matte black, mainly to match my aesthetic in my house. Leaving it unpainted would look nice, even white would make it look nice and clean.